I'm Ollie Lamping and welcome to Bright Hope. Today's class is called Heavy on the Mustard. I want to talk today a bit about seeds. My favourite bread to use for toast in the morning with my butter and marmalade is a seeded loaf or a granary loaf. Lots and lots of seeds. It just gives it, that amazing nutty feeling and the great possibility that you could crack a tooth. So there's always an element of adventure and risk involved. I love seeds. I was looking up information about seeds and found this wonderful website called Wonderopolis. My girls, quite often we give them little tasks and say, learn about such a topic or another topic, and they showed me this site, and the explanation of the seeds was this. Seeds are usually fairly small, some are even tiny. Despite their small size though, seeds contain food and all the instructions necessary to sprout to life as a plant. Despite their small size though, seeds contain food and all the instructions necessary to sprout to life as a plant. Maybe they don't have everything they need, and that's why some seeds grow and some seeds don't grow, but they all contain the information. They have the plan that they're set out to follow. Seed is very, can survive basically anything. It will remain there even if it doesn't produce a plant after a while. They actually found when they excavated Herod's fortress in Masada, they found some seed which they dated being 2,000 years old, and in 2005 they planted that seed and it produced a tree. It was a date palm seed. I don't know what that is, but that's pretty impressive that 2,000 years later the seed still had life within it, still had those instructions within it. So once it found a good spot, it said, I've waited, lads, you've placed me in good fertile land, I am now going to give it my all. And 2,000 years later, they think that this seed was around the time, it was produced around the time of Jesus. So that's pretty amazing right there. Some information on seeds is how they get out and about. Their desire to reproduce and fly, from their parents' nest and settle on their own. They have different methods, and you can see this on some of the wildlife programs and the plant life programs. One of the methods that jumped out to me was this thing called tumbleweeding, which I just thought was brilliant. I love that term, tumbleweeding. It always brought to mind, Snoopy looking at a desert road and just this tumbleweed rolling along, or me telling this really great joke and just silence and a tumbleweed, tumbleweeding. Dandelions, they're a type of plant which enjoy this tumbleweeding. Basically, it's using the wind to take all the seeds, and it just disperses them left, right, and centre. And several kilometres, several miles later, they find a good place. Maple tree seeds, they if you look those up, they have what looks like a rotor blade on one side, and they spin around. So when the wind hits them, they release themselves, and then they spin around and do these little helicopter manoeuvres to find a great place to plant away from the tree that they just left. So that's one method. Another method that seeds get out and about are using forms of transport. Jumping onto an animal, jumping onto a bear. A lot of bears do a lot of activities in the woods. So a bear comes along and this seed says, well, this is a great mode of transport, and just lunges at the bear, just throws himself, and will use his tiny little hooks to get into that fur. And then wherever the bear goes, that seed is going with him. And quite often if we go out into the countryside, we'll get home and we'll have to brush ourselves down because we've got all these things attached to us. And again, with their millions of little hooks, they've just done a number on your sweater. And you have to pull them all off and throw them. And you might find a tree growing in your lounge because he thinks, well, this is a really good place. So one of the ways of dispersion is by using different methods of transport. Another method is being eaten. Some fruits, they want to be eaten. The seeds inside, they rejoice when they're being eaten, because they get into the gut of an animal and they get a lot of stuff that they need, and then when they're pooped out, they find a really great place, and obviously they've been released from their captivity, released from their fruit. So the seed is all that remains. And that seed, when it hits the ground, it hits the ground running. So it's got everything it needs. Watermelon, cherries, tomatoes. Next time you eat cherry tomatoes, think that it's quite possible that the product of an animal eating its digestive system, its bowels, coming out the other end, it's created life for you and your salad. Scientists don't really know exactly how the seeds reproduce. All they know is that it contains the information. They know that you can give different elements that will help, that will encourage, and all the botanists, they go at it and they can create some wonderful results. But we don't exactly know why it's happening, why it's duplicating, exactly why it has all that information. And the seeds are basically a survival package. They have everything within them to reproduce, to become a plant, to become everything that they're meant to be. The info is inside the seed itself. I love that the seed itself is like a survival package. If you want to get out and about, take some seeds with you. Seeds are an amazing part of God's design. For me, this is more evidence that God is in control, because you see how these things work, and you just think, really, could that happen by chance? I don't think so. The Bible talks a lot about seeds. Mark 4:26. There are two parables here. And one after the other, so they're obviously connected, and it's talking about the kingdom of heaven. People ask, well, what is the kingdom of heaven like? And we could go into great deep theological conversations about what the kingdom of heaven is and what it represents and how it's moved and how it grows. And but simply put, Jesus responded and he said the kingdom of heaven is like a growing seed. It says here, if a man should scatter seed on the ground and should sleep by night and rise by day, and the seed should sprout and grow, he himself does not know how. The kingdom of heaven, we don't really know how it's growing. All we know is that seed is being sown and it will create results. I can't say, how is it that the things will be established, how the kingdom will be established here in Lower Early. All I can say is that seeds are being sown, and before we know it, not exactly understanding how, not having any idea how, things are going to happen. And one day we're just going to turn around and say, wow, look at all this that happened. It was like I fell asleep, I woke up, and there was, the harvest that was ready. He goes on and he says, to what shall we liken the kingdom of God? Or with what parable shall we picture it? It is like a mustard seed, which, when it is sown on the ground, is smaller than all the seeds on earth. But when it is sown, it grows up and becomes greater than all herbs, and shoots out large branches, so that the birds of the air may nest under its shade. This teaching, that's why I called it heavy on the mustard. Annie loves Dijon mustard, and she just she goes all out for the mustard. So this is in part based on the seeds, and in part because Annie loves mustard. We can interpret these parables in many different ways. I want to talk about fruit that grows in our life. This theme of fruit being reproduced in our life is a theme that goes all the way through the Bible, in the Old Testament, New Testament. From the Israelites, when they take the promised land, and God says, look, you've got to get rid of all the enemies, you've got to take them out, you've got to shove them out, you've got to push them out, you've got to take them out. When they didn't do that, then their enemies grew and slaughtered the Israelites. So, what you do now will affect you in the future. Israelites, if you don't listen to what I'm saying, then it will come back to bite you. Whatever we don't deal with comes back to bite us. Whatever seed that we're sowing will come back to haunt us. So in the Old Testament, it's very, very present that they had to obey, so that in the future, things would go according to how God had spoken. In the New Testament, little parables and little stories. Jesus, for instance, he says a little yeast will cause the whole batch of dough to inflate. He says, take away the yeast. A tiny amount that's sown there within all that dough will populate everything, will affect everything. So get rid of it. Again, it's the same theme. What you don't deal with right now will grow. Whether it be good or whether it be bad, whether it is good fruit or bad fruit, it will grow. So what we do now affects what happens in the future. We can't go back into the past and change anything in the past. That's done and dusted. But what we can do is evaluate what we're doing right now, where we stand right now, learn from what happened in the past, use the lessons that we've gone through, and even better, somebody else has gone through. If we can do that, which is very difficult to do, but if you can do that, you can avoid a whole bunch of mistakes. But we can make decisions that will affect our future for the good. So there are several truths here. I want to talk about three things, three truths. The first truth is we are constantly sowing seed. We are constantly throwing seed left, right, and center. Wherever we go, whatever we say or do, we are sowing something. We influence and we are influenced by whatever is sown in our lives, in other people's lives. All of us are sowing seeds. Our family life is seed being sown into us and us sowing seed into other people. Our teachers, people who have taught us, people have mentored us, our coaches, they're sowing seed into us. Our bosses and our colleagues, we're constantly sowing seeds. Whoever we have interaction with, we're sowing seeds into their lives, and they are sowing seed into us. All the time, seeds are being sown. Tears for Fears, sowing the seeds of love. Well, seeds are always being sown. Perhaps there is somebody that say, well, how can I sow into my son's life? I'm not allowed in the house, or I've decided they're better off without me. Well, that's not the case. You are sowing seed. You're sowing the seed of absence, or a dad who's in the house that doesn't have any relationship with his kids. There's no interaction there. You are sowing the seed of silence into your kid's life. It's almost like an abandonment, not physically but emotionally. You're just separating yourself, and you're sowing that seed into your child's life. There are kids that grow up thinking they're idiots because all they hear from their parents is that you're an idiot and you shouldn't do this and you can't do that and you're limited and you never do anything, and they end up believing that because that seed has been sown into their life. Dads, parents, mums, dads, you need to interact with your kids no matter how old they are. You need to bother them. You need to get into their face. You need to talk with them. You need to interact with them. And it's not going to be good if you haven't done it for a long time. It's the first couple of times it's going to be a struggle. The first couple of months is going to be a struggle. But you start to understand and you get involved in their lives, because what you sow now, you will reap later on. So in relationships, we're always sowing seeds. Even, like I say, parents who aren't involved or have left the house, no matter what's happening between mum and dad, the kids need their dad around them. They need hugs from their dads. They need kisses from their mums and their dads, because that is seed being sown. We should say, I love you, son. I'm proud of you. Parents, couples, we need to say all the time, I love you. It's not enough just to say, well, or I'm thinking it. Well, it doesn't count if it's just an intention. It has to be, a fruit. It has to be something given over. So you have to sow seeds, because we're constantly sowing seeds in relationships. We can sow into friendship and we will reap friendship. We can sow into violence. We can sow into strife. Division, anger. He who lives by the sword dies by the sword. Whatever we sow into, we will reap. We reap what we sow. Perhaps we're going through difficulties in our life and we say, why am I encountering this? Well, it's not because of the fruit that you're going through that you need to focus your attention and say, what is this fruit? You need to focus on the seeds, because you're constantly sowing seeds. Genesis 1:11 talks about the creation, and it says that God put plants and put trees, and he said, and they will recreate fruit of their own kind, according to their kinds. Plants bearing seed according to their kinds, and trees bearing fruit with seed in it according to their kind. Whatever is the seed, that will reproduce fruit. If you sow into oranges, you will reap oranges. If you sow into apples, you will reap apples. If you sow into lemons, you will, etc. It's very straightforward. Whatever is the seed, that will be the fruit, because all the information, science states, whatever is the information within that seed, it will duplicate itself. And Galatians 6:7 says, "Do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. Whatever a man whatever a man sows, that is what he will reap." We reap what we sow. And this brings me to the second truth. We are constantly producing fruit. We are constantly producing results. If it's not what we want, don't focus so much on the fruit. Be aware of the fruit and make the decision of whether you're happy with it or whether you need to make changes. But you need to focus on the seed that's being sown, because it's going to be very difficult to change the situation if it's been a long time coming. The only thing you can do is focus on what's going to come around and ask for God's grace to go through with what you're experiencing right now. There can be no fruit without seeds. There can be no fruit without that seed falling to the ground, finding a place, being pooped out of an animal. There will be no fruit without seeds. So we're constantly sowing seeds and we're constantly producing fruit because of those seeds that have been sown. And we need to be aware that, we don't need to struggle or stress out, get frustrated if the fruit that we're experiencing is not what we want. You don't walk through a forest and all the trees are, they're struggling and they're straining and they're hurting, in order to produce good fruit. They just do it naturally. And our fruit will come naturally. We need to focus on the seeds. Now, I found this great passage in Leviticus 19:19, which I've read it a good number of times before, and a couple of times I've looked at it and thought, what is that doing there? What does this mean? It says very easily, "You shall not sow your field with mixed seed." You shall not sow your field with mixed seed. Don't mix seeds. I've heard don't mix drinks, but I hadn't heard do not mix seed. Now, if you're a botanist or you're poison ivy, don't panic. You're not going to have the wrath of God fall on you because you're experimenting with seeds and trying to create, a cross orange. I don't know what you're trying to do, but you don't need to panic about that. Basically, what this means, because we see that everything in the Bible is applicable. Everything is useful. The Bible says everything can be used, for our teaching, for exhortation, for our blessing, for our growing. This word about don't mix seeds, I tried to investigate. First off, I spoke with a friend at work who she loves her plants and her flowers. Thank you very much, Marion. And I also looked it up on the internet. What does this mean? And basically the conclusion that I came to was that if you mix seed, then you can, if you're talking about a large field and you want to grow certain things, because you want a big harvest and you want to reap that harvest, the wise thing to do would not be mixing seeds because of various reasons. The crops come at different times. Different crops suffer different things, experience different things, and they can contaminate one another. One may be resistant to some attack, to some type of insect, and the other one isn't. So one of them may attract an insect, which it can resist, but the other crop will not be able to resist it. One crop could overshadow another crop and not allow it to bear fruit. One crop could steal all the nutrients from the ground, and the other one could wither and die. And basically the result of having a field with mixed seed would be that neither of them grow to strength. One of them is weakened and the other one probably dies out. So if you want to be a good farmer, if you want to have a good crop, you don't want to mix seed. This field will be dedicated to this, the other field will be dedicated to that. What does this mean for our lives? What is this about? I'm always sowing seeds and I'm always seeing the results of that seed. There's always a seed and there's always a fruit. basically we can often negate the fruit we want by the types of seed that we're planting. We can often say, well, I want to experience friendship, so I'm going to sow into friendship. But if at the same time you're sowing into gossip, or you're talking behind their back, or you're being disloyal, or you're also sowing seeds of discord, seeds of division. Well, guess which seed is gonna be stronger? Which seed is gonna come faster? Unfortunately, bad news travels a lot faster than good news. We turn on the telly and it's full of bad news. That sells newspapers. Good news, you don't open the newspaper and it says, hey, everything's going perfectly well, have a great day. That will not sell newspapers. Bad news travels a lot faster. Bad things come about a lot faster. The dark side is a lot more seductive. The power is almost immediate. We have to invest in good fruit. We have to invest in seed, which is slightly more difficult and will take more time. And if you're sowing two types of seed, one good, one bad, then the good will be negated, will be taken out of the picture by the bad. So, perhaps you say, well, I want to produce this, and my intention is this, but my actions are this. Well, good intention is not enough. We need to focus on having one seed in our life, and that is good seed, because that will produce good fruit. Quite often I've looked at fruit in my life and said, I want to change this. I don't know how to change this. I've tried changing it. There may be a change for a couple of weeks, a couple of months, perhaps even a year. But eventually I return to my default mode. I struggle with trying to change myself. I've come to the point of understanding it's almost impossible. We want to change everybody around us as well. We want them to do this or do that, but we can't even change our own lives. The third truth is this. We need a special type of seed in our life which will change our default programming, which will change our default position. And that seed is the seed of salvation. That seed is the seed that Jesus, again, returning to the mustard seed, returning to the seed that is sown and causes fruit to grow. We don't know how. The crop that comes, we don't know how. He says that is what the kingdom of heaven is like. So, good intentions and recognizing good fruit, bad fruit, all of that is very nice and it'll help you for a bit, but it will not change you. The only thing that can change you, Jesus is the only thing that can change you. He's the only person that can change you. I can't change myself, but my life in His hands, His word of life in me, His seed of life in me. The Bible talks about the salvation, and it talks about the seed of salvation in Genesis 3:15. Adam and Eve, they were in the garden. They had everything, given to them on a plate. They could eat whatever they wanted. There was only one thing they couldn't eat, and immediately the devil comes in and says, "Oh, you can eat all the rest. Well, what about that one thing that you can't eat? Can you eat that one?" He didn't focus on everything they had. He focused on what they didn't have. And immediately they fell, they disobeyed, sin entered into the world. And because of their sin, all of us, we have that same choice, and we all falter. We all fall. All of us have sin in our lives. Is there anybody who can say, there is no sin in my life? No. Everybody has screwed up. And because of that, the Bible says we're dead in our sins. Because of that, our default position is to have sin in our lives. We all know what we shouldn't do, and we do it. And because of that, there is death upon us. But God loves us so much. After Adam and Eve fell, He gave a promise to Adam and Eve, and the promise was this, found in Genesis 3:15. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. This is talking to Adam and Eve, but it's also talking to the enemy. It's talking to the devil. It says, "He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel." You'll grab a hold of him, and you will attack him, and you will affect him. And when it talks about you shall bruise his heel, He's talking about the death that Jesus was gonna face. But it says He will bruise your head. He's gonna crush you. He's gonna take you out of the picture. But it says your seed and her seed, talking about Eve. Now Jesus came through Adam and Eve and the seed. came through from Adam to Abraham, Abraham to David, David to Joseph. Jesus came through that lineage, and so this prophecy was fulfilled, thousands of years later, but it was a promise right from the beginning. This promise of salvation, and that is what Jesus has for us. He wants to change our default position from being one of somebody who desires to do good but can't do it because we're in sin and we're dead to our sin, to being somebody who is knowing Jesus, restored to life in Jesus. And occasionally we mess up, yes, but we have Jesus in our life. And how do we get to that position? Well, we have to sow in good seed, and that seed is the kingdom of heaven. We have to say, Jesus, come into my life. His word is truth, and he says, I am knocking on the door, and if you open up, then I will enter in and I will dwell within you. I will eat with you. It talks about fellowship with you. The salvation that we have, which cancels out this original default position, is coming to know who Jesus is and saying, no, I don't want to follow sowing and reaping in things which will eventually destroy my life. I might have a great life here, but what good is it to receive everything the world has but to lose your soul? We need to give our lives to Jesus. We need to say, Lord, you take control and I give you my life. And when you sow into that, well, then everything else, the kingdom of heaven, will start to grow in your life. And from one moment to the next, you'll turn around and you say, how did this happen? And you'll be in the same position as me. I don't know how it happened, but I know it's absolutely amazing. It's the best decision I ever made to say, Jesus, take control of my life. That's why, Jesus said, have faith like a mustard seed. The only step you need to take is a tiny, tiny seed. One of the smallest seeds, the smallest tree seed. You don't need a lot. All you need to do is say, Lord, I don't understand it, but I want to trust in you. I want to believe in you. And if you can say, yes, I will take that step of faith, go heavy on the mustard, and then Jesus will come and respond, and he will enter into your heart. He accepts the invitation and says, I want to be in your life. So thank you ever so much. Remember that all our information you can find on our webpage. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel to see this preaching, other preachings. If you have any questions, if you have anything you want to ask us, you can send us a message on our Facebook page, and we would love to see you. We meet here in Lower Early every Tuesday evening at 7:30, and our address and everything there is on our page. So God bless you, and thank you ever so much for listening.